In the grand tapestry of cosmic civilizations, where species debated everything from the proper way to fold space-time to whether pineapple belonged on pizza across dimensional barriers, there remained exactly one topic that achieved unanimous consensus. When the apex predator called, you ran. Fast. Preferably in the opposite direction of wherever that call originated, and ideally while leaving behind a decoy planet or two for good measure. So when the transmission crackled through subspace on a Tuesday afternoon, because apparently even cosmic horrors observed standard galactic business hours, the reaction was immediate and unanimous. Emergency evacuation protocols activated across 12 star systems. The Zenthari packed their ceremonial death crystals and fled to their backup homeworld. The Tharkin abandoned their meditation pods mid-enlightenment and scrambled for the nearest wormhole. Even the notoriously stubborn Groxian hive mind, which had once refused to evacuate during a supernova because it would interrupt their tax season, was suddenly very interested in extended vacation time. The only species that didn't immediately soil themselves and run for the hills, humanity. Mostly because they were too busy arguing about whether the transmission was real or just another elaborate prank by their neighbors, the Proxima Centaurians, who had a regrettable history with fake alien invasion broadcasts. "Ladies and gentlemen," announced the ethereal voice that somehow managed to sound both ancient and distinctly unimpressed with the state of modern civilization, "I am what your quaint little databases classify as the apex predator. For the past 47 million years, I have hunted the greatest warriors, the most cunning strategists, and the most formidable civilizations across known space." The voice paused, presumably for dramatic effect, though it's worth noting that dramatic pauses lose some of their impact when your audience is primarily composed of beings frantically stuffing belongings into escape pods. "I have chosen humanity as my next prey." Cue the sound of every non-human species in the galaxy collectively losing what passed for their minds. The ethereal Council of Wisdom, which prided itself on maintaining composure even during galactic catastrophes, immediately convened an emergency session titled, "How Screwed Are We This Time?" The mechanical hegemony, whose emotions were supposedly governed by pure logic, started displaying error messages that roughly translated to, "What the actual hell?" And the psychic dreamweavers, who could normally predict cosmic events centuries in advance, suddenly developed a peculiar case of selective amnesia regarding anything involving Earth's solar system. Meanwhile, humanity's response was characteristically human. "Hold up," said the Secretary of Interplanetary Affairs during an emergency UN session. "Is this the same apex predator that supposedly wiped out the warrior clans of Rethok Prime?" "The very same," confirmed the xenobiology expert, consulting her hastily assembled notes. "Also responsible for the extinction of the Titan hunters of Kronos 7, the battle pigeons of the Void Realms, and approximately 47 other species that were supposedly unbeatable in combat." "Ah." The secretary leaned back in his chair with the kind of casual indifference that had made humanity simultaneously famous and infamous across the galaxy. "And it wants to hunt us specifically?" "Appears to be the general idea, yes." "Well," he said, reaching for his coffee with the steady hand of someone who had clearly missed the memo about appropriate levels of cosmic terror, "I guess we'd better dust off the war protocols then." This reaction sent ripples of pure horror through the galactic monitoring stations. The Zentari ambassador to Earth sent 17 increasingly frantic messages, each one essentially variations on the theme of "Please tell us you're joking." The collective consciousness of the hive worlds transmitted what could only be described as the psychic equivalent of someone screaming into a pillow. Even the stoic rock people of Granite 7 began stress-eating minerals. Because here's the thing about the apex predator that every other species understood with crystal clarity. You didn't fight it. You couldn't fight it. You found the deepest hole in the most remote corner of space, crawled into it, and prayed to whatever deities you favored that it would get bored and move on to hunting something else, preferably something that wasn't you. The apex predator had earned its reputation through 47 million years of methodical, unstoppable hunting. It would arrive at a world, announce its presence, and then systematically dismantle whatever civilization had the misfortune to catch its attention. The few survivors of these encounters, and there were always survivors because the predator apparently enjoyed having witnesses to spread its reputation, described a being of such overwhelming power that resistance wasn't just futile, It was laughably absurd. The warrior clans of Rathok Prime had possessed battle armor that could deflect starlight and weapons capable of cracking moons. They lasted 6 hours. The Titan Hunters had biotechnology that allowed them to wrestle black holes into submission, 4 hours, 12 minutes. The battle ponchons could manipulate reality with their thoughts and had once talked a dying star back to life just to prove they could, 2 hours, 53 minutes. And according to reports, the Predator had seemed almost disappointed by their lack of creativity. So when humanity's official response to the apex predator's challenge was transmitted across the galaxy at precisely 3:47 p.m. Earth Standard Time, the collective reaction could best be described as stunned silence, followed by the sound of several species reconsidering their life choices. The message was brief, direct, and so quintessentially human that xenoanthropologists would spend decades trying to explain it to other species. Challenge accepted. Bring snacks. This might take a while, and thus, with all the ceremony of someone accepting a dinner invitation, humanity became the first species in recorded galactic history to voluntarily engage the apex predator in combat. The smart money, naturally, was on humanity's extinction within the hour. The Bookmakers Guild of Tau Ceti was offering odds of 50,000 to 1 against human survival, and even those seemed generous. Betting pools opened across 17 star systems, most focused not on whether humanity would lose, but on precisely how quickly they would be annihilated. But then again, the smart money had never properly accounted for humanity's most defining characteristic: their absolute refusal to acknowledge when they were clearly, obviously, and mathematically doomed. As the transmission ended, and the galaxy held its collective breath, one might have wondered if the apex predator truly understood what it had just unleashed. Because while every other species had learned to fear the ultimate hunter, they had also learned something else. There was a reason humanity had earned their own reputation across the stars. They were the species that looked at impossible odds and asked, yeah, but what if we tried it anyway? 3 days after humanity's monumentally stupid response echoed across the galaxy, reality decided to make things interesting. The first sign wasn't a dramatic ripping of space-time or some grandiose display of cosmic power. No, it was the sudden and complete silence of every deep space monitoring station within a 50 light-year radius of Earth's solar system. The second sign was when every psychic species in the galaxy simultaneously developed what could only be described as the worst headache in recorded history, followed by a unanimous declaration that they were taking early retirement and moving to nice, quiet dimensions where apex predators were limited to things like particularly aggressive houseplants. The third sign was when space itself began to wrinkle. Now, space wrinkling wasn't entirely unprecedented in galactic history. Black holes did it, wormholes did it, the occasional reality warping experiment gone wrong did it. But this was different. This was space wrinkling with what could only be described as deliberate artistic flair, as if the fundamental forces of the universe had suddenly developed opinions about interior decorating. The Ethereal Council, monitoring from what they considered a safe distance of approximately 3 galaxies away, watched their instruments with the kind of horrified fascination typically reserved for watching someone pet a particularly venomous space tiger. Their readings made absolutely no sense. According to their most advanced sensors, something was approaching Earth that simultaneously existed and didn't exist, was infinitely large and impossibly small, and appeared to be generating enough energy to power 17 star systems while somehow producing a net negative impact on local spacetime. "This is impossible," declared the Council's chief scientist, whose species had evolved beyond the need for physical forms and existed as pure thought. "Nothing can violate this many laws of physics simultaneously." "Perhaps," suggested another council member with the tone of someone desperately grasping for rational explanations, "the humans have developed some sort of reality-dampening field that's affecting our readings." The suggestion was met with the psychic equivalent of derisive laughter. Humanity's most advanced technology was barely capable of reliable interplanetary travel. Their idea of quantum mechanics involved hitting things with increasingly sophisticated hammers until they worked properly. The notion that they could somehow interfere with readings taken from 3 galaxies away was absurd, which naturally made it exactly the sort of thing humanity would accidentally accomplish through sheer bloody-mindedness. Meanwhile, back on Earth, humanity was doing what they did best: completely ignoring the mounting evidence that they were about to become extinct, and instead focusing on the important question of who got to fire the first shot. The hastily assembled Global Defense Initiative had somehow managed to unite every military force on the planet under a single command structure, which was either a miracle of international cooperation or proof that humans really did work better when faced with impossible odds. Orbital defense platforms bristled with every weapon humanity had ever conceived, from traditional kinetic bombardment systems to experimental plasma cannons that had a distressing tendency to explode during testing. "Sir," reported the tactical officer to the newly appointed Supreme Commander of Human Defense, "long-range sensors are picking up something. It's big." "How big?" "Well, sir, our instruments keep giving us different readings. Sometimes it looks like a small moon, sometimes it looks like a gas giant, and sometimes—" He paused, checking his readings again with the expression of someone who deeply regretted his career choices. "Sometimes it looks like it's the size of a solar system." The Supreme Commander, a grizzled veteran who had earned his position through the simple expedient of being the only general brave enough or stupid enough to volunteer for the job, nodded thoughtfully. "And what does our xenobiology team make of this? They've locked themselves in a bunker and started writing what they're calling farewell letters to the concept of rational science, sir." "Fair enough. What about our strategy department?" "They've submitted a battle plan that consists entirely of the phrase, 'shoot it until it stops moving,' written in increasingly large font, sir." "Solid plan. I like the simplicity." The Supreme Commander turned to survey the tactical display showing Earth's defenses. It was by any reasonable measure pitifully inadequate for facing down a cosmic horror that had been systematically exterminating civilizations since before Earth's sun had finished condensing from cosmic dust. "Any word from our allies? The Proxima Centaurians have relocated their entire civilization to the Andromeda galaxy and sent us a fruit basket with a card that says it's been nice knowing you. The Tausetians offered to name a star after us, posthumously, and the Vegan Federation has declared a day of mourning in our honor, which is scheduled for next Tuesday. Thoughtful of them to wait until after we're dead to mourn us. Actually, sir, I think they're planning to start mourning us preemptively. Apparently the vegan concept of time is more flexible than ours." And then it arrived. The apex predator's ship, if ship was even the correct term for something that seemed to exist in 17 dimensions simultaneously while somehow occupying the space of a small asteroid, materialized at the edge of the solar system with all the fanfare of a cosmic middle finger pointed directly at the laws of physics. It wasn't sleek like the vessels of the advanced civilizations. It wasn't geometric like the constructs of the machine intelligences. It wasn't organic like the bioships of the hive minds. It was something else entirely, a writhing mass of what appeared to be crystallized darkness, shot through with veins of light that hurt to look at directly. It pulsed with a rhythm that seemed almost biological, as if the entire structure was somehow alive. Every sensor array in the solar system immediately overloaded and shut down. Emergency backup systems kicked in, took one look at the readings, and promptly declared themselves conscientious objectors to the entire concept of measurement. Even the primitive radio telescopes of Earth's scientific institutions began receiving signals that translated to what could only be described as cosmic screaming. The ship moved through space with the casual disregard for physics that characterized everything about the apex predator. It didn't accelerate, it simply was in one place and then it was in another, as if distance was merely a suggestion it had chosen to ignore. Gravitational fields bent around it like light around a black hole, but instead of the orderly distortion of normal space-time curvature, reality seemed to develop what could only be called a nervous twitch in its presence. As it approached Earth, the ship began to unfold. Sections that had appeared solid revealed themselves to be dimensional origami, expanding into configurations that shouldn't have been able to exist in normal space. Weapon arrays that had been hidden in the folds of compressed reality, deployed with the smooth precision of a predator extending its claws. The message that followed was transmitted simultaneously on every frequency in every language and directly into the consciousness of every sentient being in the solar system. It bypassed communication devices entirely and spoke directly to the part of the brain responsible for understanding threats. "I am the apex predator," the voice announced with the casual confidence of someone stating an obvious fact. "I have crossed the void between galaxies to reach you. I have ended civilizations that commanded the power of stars and brought extinction to species that thought themselves gods. I am the final test that all warrior races must face, and I am the last thing they ever see." The voice paused, and in that pause, every human in the solar system felt the weight of 47 million years of accumulated death pressing down on their consciousness. "You have accepted my challenge, little humans. This pleases me. It has been some time since I encountered a species brave enough to face me willingly, rather than cowering in whatever holes they could find. Perhaps you will provide more sport than the last few civilizations, who disappointed me greatly with their lack of imagination." Another pause, during which the ship's weapon arrays began to glow with energy signatures that made Earth's nuclear arsenal look like particularly aggressive fireworks. "I shall arrive at your world in precisely 1 standard galactic hour. Use this time wisely, pray to whatever gods you worship, make peace with whatever regrets haunt you, and prepare for the honor of dying at the hands of the ultimate hunter. Few species are granted such a privilege." The transmission cut off, leaving behind a silence that seemed to echo with the weight of impending doom. In the command center of the Global Defense Initiative, the Supreme Commander considered this information with the careful attention it deserved, then turned to his communications officer. "Send a reply," he said calmly. "Sir?" "What should it say?" The Supreme Commander smiled with the kind of expression that had made humanity simultaneously beloved and feared across the galaxy. The smile of someone who had just been told something was impossible and had taken it as a personal challenge. "Tell it we'll be waiting." 1 hour later, the apex predator discovered that hunting humanity was going to be significantly more complicated than advertised. The first hint should have been when its scanning sweep was met not with cowering, but with aggressive curiosity. Instead of hiding their military installations, humans had illuminated them with spotlights, arranging them in patterns that spelled out "come and get us" in 17 different languages across the planet's surface. The second hint was when the predator's intimidation assault was met with applause. From orbital stations that should have been evacuated, humans were cheering as reality-warping energy beams carved decorative patterns through their atmosphere. "Magnificent work on the light show," came an enthusiastic transmission. "The way you made the aurora borealis spell out 'death approaches' was particularly artistic. Our social media platforms are going wild with the footage. Would you mind doing it again? Some people missed the live stream." The apex predator paused, genuinely confused for the first time in several million years. Prey species typically responded to overwhelming force with terror, despair, and frantic bargaining. They did not provide constructive feedback on the aesthetic quality of their own impending doom. Perhaps these humans didn't understand what they faced. The predator decided to be more direct. It materialized its physical form above Earth's largest cities simultaneously, a towering amalgamation of nightmares, wreathed in the cold fire of dying stars, and crowned with the screams of extinct civilizations. The response was immediate. Humans started taking pictures. "Holy hell, would you look at the size of that thing? Quick, somebody get this on video. I'm standing next to an actual cosmic horror and my phone battery just died. This is the worst day of my life." The predator watched in bewilderment as humans streamed out of buildings, not to flee, but to get better camera angles. Traffic jams formed as people abandoned vehicles to gawk. Street vendors appeared selling t-shirts reading, "I survived the apex predator's intimidation display." The predator escalated. It reached out with tendrils of pure destructive force, intending to demonstrate its power by disintegrating city blocks. The energy beams lanced down with enough power to crack continents. They struck a shimmering energy barrier that hadn't been there moments before. "Shield generators online," came a cheerful announcement. "Thanks for the target practice. Your energy signature is helping us calibrate our defensive systems. Could you try hitting us from a different angle? We want to make sure our coverage is uniform." The apex predator stared at the barrier that had absorbed an attack capable of sterilizing planets. According to every scan, humanity barely possessed interplanetary flight technology, so where had they gotten defenses that could stop its attacks? "Oh, that," came another transmission. "We've been working on that for 3 days. Amazing what you can accomplish when properly motivated. Plus, we had help from our new friends." "New friends?" The predator spoke aloud, its voice carrying across the electromagnetic spectrum. "The Zentran refugees who fled when you showed up. Turns out they were so grateful to escape that they shared some advanced defensive technology. Same with the Thakins, the Groxians, and about a dozen other species. They're all rooting for us now. We've got quite the cheering section in the Andromeda galaxy. The Predator felt genuine irritation, not mild annoyance at slow prey, but burning irritation at prey making its job difficult through weaponized friendship. Fine. If humans wanted games, it would show them what happened to species that annoyed the ultimate hunter. The Predator began unfolding its true power. Reality around Earth buckled as it reached into dimensions existing only between thoughts. It drew upon energy sources predating the current universe, and weapons that had been old when first stars learned to burn. Space around the planet filled with constructs of crystallized malice. Humanity's response was swift. They launched everything. Not strategically, everything. Every missile, energy weapon, kinetic projectile, every experimental device too dangerous to test normally. The sky erupted in fireworks that made supernovas look understated. Most of it was ineffective against the Predator's defenses, but the sheer volume was impressive and creative. Mixed with conventional weapons were devices that shouldn't work, missiles phasing through dimensions before exploding, energy weapons firing concentrated irony, kinetic projectiles traveling backwards through time to hit targets before being fired. "How are you doing that?" the Predator demanded. "Doing what? Your weapons half violate fundamental laws of reality." "Oh, those laws. We never paid much attention. They seemed like suggestions. Plus we figured if you could ignore physics, we could too. Turnabout is fair play." The Predator felt uncertainty creeping in. It had never encountered a species that responded to cosmic horror by essentially saying, "Hold my beer and watch this," before developing impossible weapons through stubborn refusal to acknowledge they shouldn't work. It tried surgical precision instead of overwhelming force, reaching out to delicately dismantle Earth's defenses piece by piece. The humans immediately began reverse engineering its attacks. "Fascinating energy signature. Our science teams are analyzing the dimensional resonance patterns. Do you mind if we borrow this technique? We're thinking it would be great for our weapons systems." "You cannot simply borrow cosmic forces beyond your comprehension." "May not. You're using them. How hard can it be?" The Predator watched in growing horror as humanity incorporated its own techniques into their defensive systems. Within minutes, Earth's platforms were firing back with weapons utilizing the same reality-warping principles it had taken millennia to master. They weren't using them correctly. Their implementation was crude, inefficient, and dangerous to the users. But they worked. Through sheer bloody-minded determination and weaponized ignorance, humanity was making them work. Worse yet, they were improving them. "You know," came another transmission, "this is actually quite fun. We were getting bored with conventional warfare. Thanks for the inspiration." Fun. They thought this was fun. The apex predator, ultimate hunter of the cosmos, bane of civilizations, was being treated like entertainment by a species that had learned interplanetary travel less than a century ago. For the first time in 47 million years, the apex predator began considering it might have made a terrible mistake. Behind it, unnoticed in the chaos, several human vassals that hadn't been there moments before began moving into flanking positions with the patient stealth of persistence hunters who had scented wounded prey. The apex predator's first clue that the hunt had gone catastrophically wrong came when it realized it was being hunted. This revelation arrived with all the subtlety of a supernova in a library, specifically when the predator attempted to withdraw from Earth's orbital space and discovered that humanity had somehow managed to surround it. Not with a traditional blockade, that would have been laughably inadequate, but with a three-dimensional web of vessels that seemed to exist in several dimensions simultaneously. "Going somewhere?" came a cheerful transmission from what appeared to be a modified cargo hauler bristling with weapons that definitely violated several dozen galactic treaties. "The party's just getting started." The Predator tried to phase shift into subspace, its standard method for disengaging from tedious prey. It encountered a barrier that felt suspiciously like its own energy signature, but somehow inverted. "Oh, we figured out how to do that reverse engineering thing you were so worried about," explained another human voice, this one coming from a vessel that looked like someone had strapped engines to a small moon. "Turns out cosmic horror technology has really good documentation once you know where to look. Your phase-shifting ability was particularly interesting. We've improved it by about 30%. The apex predator felt something it hadn't experienced since the early days of the universe. Genuine fear. Not the healthy respect for superior force that had kept it alive for 47 million years, but the pure, primal terror of prey that had suddenly realized it was no longer the apex of anything. "This is impossible," it transmitted, probing desperately for weaknesses in the human formation. "You are a barely spacefaring species. Your technology is primitive. Your understanding of cosmic forces is rudimentary at best." "Yeah, we get that a lot," came the reply, tinged with what sounded like amusement. "But here's the thing about humans. We're really good at learning from our mistakes. And you, my cosmic friend, just gave us a masterclass in advanced warfare." The Predator's sensors detected energy signatures that made its own weapons look quaint. Somehow, in the span of a few hours, humanity had not only reverse-engineered its technology, but had begun iterating on it with the kind of reckless innovation that characterized their entire species. "The real problem," continued the human voice, "is that you made a fundamental error in your target selection. You chose us because you thought we were fearless warriors. But we're not fearless. We're just too stupid to know when we're supposed to be afraid." The Predator watched in horror as human vassals began deploying weapons that shouldn't exist, reality anchors that prevented dimensional shifting, entropy reversers that undid damage faster than it could be inflicted, and something that its instruments could only classify as weaponized friendship. A device that somehow convinced enemy systems to switch sides. "See, the thing is," the human continued, "every other species you hunted was advanced enough to understand exactly how outclassed they were. They knew they couldn't win, so they didn't try. But we're just primitive enough to think impossible means hasn't been done yet." The apex predator made a desperate attempt to break through the human formation, unleashing the full fury of its accumulated power. The humans responded by doing something that defied every law of physics, metaphysics, and common sense. They began to enjoy themselves more. "This is the best Tuesday we've had in centuries," someone shouted over the communications channel. "Can we keep it?" "Keep what?" the predator asked, though it was beginning to suspect it didn't want to know the answer. "You, obviously. Do you have any idea how much our science teams are learning from this? Plus, the tourism potential is incredible. Come to Earth, the only planet where you can hunt a cosmic horror. We're going to make a fortune." And in that moment, the apex predator understood the terrible truth. It hadn't chosen humanity as prey. It had chosen humanity as a predator, and they had accepted the invitation with characteristic enthusiasm. The hunter had become the hunted, and the hunted were having entirely too much fun with their new pet cosmic horror. "So," came the final transmission as the human fleet closed in, "should we discuss terms of surrender, or would you prefer to keep fighting? Because honestly, we're good either way." For the first time in 47 million years, the apex predator whimpered.